Hello, bonjour, namaste, ni hao, and ohio, everybody. What is going on? It is Gale here. Welcome back to the YouTube channel once again for another Danmachi Season 5 video. And today, we are here with Episode 7's breakdown and, of course, our first and hopefully only rant video of the season. Yes, I feel like I need to rant about this episode just a little bit because I feel like it's the weakest episode and it kind of proves that the 15 episode count was a bad idea in the first place. Now, of course, if you guys want to enjoy this video, please be sure to leave a like down below, subscribe to the channel for more content, and let me know your guys' thoughts in the comment section down below. And more importantly, if you're an anime only, now I'm not saying light novel readers, you can't obviously leave your comments, but I want to see more comments from the anime onlys in this episode's breakdown video, because I think that there is a bit of a discrepancy between what light novel readers think about this episode and what anime onlys think about this episode. What I'm also doing for this video, and I hope I get the responses before the end of this video so I can actually mention it as well, is I want to actually, get an opinion from some close friends of mine who are anime onlys as well, who obviously are following Danmachi pretty closely. I want to see what they think about the episode as well. Obviously, again, from an anime only's perspective, I feel like a lot of people like this episode, whereas light novel readers, they're tending from either absolutely hating this episode to understanding the reasons why they cut a lot and skipped a lot, or not necessarily cut a lot, they rushed through it a lot, but also kind of being like, well, you could have still done a bit better there nonetheless, and I want to see what they think as well. I want to see the differences between the opinions for sure. So obviously put your thoughts in the comment section down below. I'm curious to see what you guys have to say down below. Now, the reason why this breakdown video is a little bit later is because I wanted to rewatch the episode again just to kind of get a complete idea on like how I really feel about this episode, right? Because there's a difference between watching it for the first time, that hype of the episode and everything, and then rewatching it again, and then of course also rereading this section of the light novel. And there's a lot to cover as well, right? And I think, of course, we're going to cover so much more in the cut contents video. That's going to be like a proper 30-minute long cut contents video. I do believe that to be the case. But in this video, I want to just talk over everything that happened, and I want to give my thoughts on why I think that this is the worst episode of Season 5, by the way. This is hands down the weakest episode of Season 5. For sure, even worse than episode 5 of season 5, of course, right? Yeah, I think it's the weakest episode. I wouldn't say it's the worst ever Danmachi episode. I think there have been worse, to be quite honest. I'd say season 2 and season 3 are filled with much worse episodes, but this episode is definitely like a weak episode for sure. But anyways, let's break this episode down. Let's talk about everything that happened in this episode, and obviously explain a couple of things as well, right? So first and foremost, we come immediately and start off with of course Ryu and Asie, right? Following the events of episode 5, we've been wondering where they've been, so we now know that they're outside of Urario, and obviously they're trying to gather basically their wits together, basically, and try and figure out what to do next, because of course Ryu's been unconscious for the last couple of days, it seems like, or at least a day or two, and of course Asie has just been trying to figure out what's been happening in Urario while everybody's been charmed as well. And the first thing they do is try and figure out if they can gather some information before they head into Urario to obviously, or before they try and come up with a plan to obviously fix things, of course, right? Now, when this happened in the light novel, and I will say the anime actually did a decent job in actually trying to portray that to us as well, is obviously we thought that Ryu and Asie were going to be the ones to have to solve everything, basically, right? And it felt like this was obviously a continuation of volumes 12 to 14, where Ryu is obviously the main character or main female protagonist for that arc. It carried forward into this season as well, of course, right? By extension of her connection with Steer/Freya and everything, right? And I thought that was going to be the case here as well. Of course, what happens later on in this episode immediately just removed all chance of that happening, of course, right? I mean, there's still a possibility of it, but I feel like it removed every single chance of it actually happening. But yeah, I mean, it was pretty cool to see, of course, Asie also come into play as well. I feel like Asie is one of those very underrated characters that we see regularly in every season, of course, being Hermes is Hermes is go-to for getting shit done, basically, right? It's always good to see her getting some spotlight, I feel, always. I really like also Asie's and Ryu's relationship as well since season 1. It's always been really good. Now, we move over immediately to, of course, the Uranos and Hestia scene, of course, right? which in the anime and in the light novel, when I'm comparing the two, the anime is definitely condensed a lot in this scene. And I feel like if they had to condense any scene, obviously to make up for the time and everything, I think the scene was perfectly fine to condense. A lot of people I saw were saying like, oh, they did Hestia dirty here. She's got so much value in this season. She's doing so well in this season. And then, you kind of cut her, one of her best scenes, of course, right, with the Uranos. And I'm like, yes, but it got the point across extremely well nonetheless, with the whole Uranos situation and everything, making sure, Hestia's feelings were brought across to us, of course, right, of the fact that, she's feeling lonely. That's the whole point of this episode, right, is the whole loneliness factor, right? That is the episode title. And they got that across really well, saying that, oh, Hestia wanted to share this with Uranos, who's also not been charmed, because then she'd at least have an ally, to try and figure things out. But then, obviously, she doesn't now, because obviously Felds is there. Felds has been charmed as well, and is, it basically becomes a big issue there, of course, right? Unfortunately, it becomes a big issue if Felds is able to reveal to Freya that both Hestia and Uranos are cooking up a plan, cooking up a storm, right? And so I think that they got that point across really well. So I'm not going to really put a negative on this part of the episode. I think this one was not bad at all. I did feel it was rushed, but if I had to, rush through anything from the light novel, I think the scene being rushed is completely fine for me personally. I think it is absolutely fine. But I will say from here on out, it's big problems, big problems. So of course they talk about Freya's talking to her execs about everything in terms of like the training side of things, and of course also just generally as well with Anya, the hostess of fertility, Ryu situation, everything, all of that sort of stuff. I think it is pretty good in that sense. I think they handled this scene really well overall. The execs and Freya scene, I think that was done well. As well, to be honest, some details were missing, like minor details, like Freya yawning to indicate that she was tired from reading the logbook the entire night and stuff like that. Very minor thing here, but I think this was not bad at all. Again, I want to give props to the episode where it did well in, getting, certain details across. But, I mean, again, there's just so much to break down that I feel like they've, done weaker. Obviously, this whole scene, the training scene with Hayden, I think was a bit better done in the light novel. I feel like, at least in my personal opinion, I feel like it was better done. It brings out that connection between Hayden and Bell, which we know is pretty significant, thanks to what happens at the end of this episode, as well as just generally since the start of the season as well, right? We know Hayden's cooking up something potentially in the background, right? Knowing what he thinks about Freya, of course, and what he feels about Freya, and what he feels Freya is thinking, of course, right? So there is that factor and that thought process that we have to obviously consider. And I feel like them giving a little bit more time to Hayden and Bell's connection could have been a bit better as well. But again, this is the whole issue. They just don't have the time. And I'll explain why I feel like this is unfortunately worse than episode 5, because episode 5 could have easily been corrected. This episode just inherently shows a flaw in, unfortunately, limited time, sadly. Just a lack of time, because even if you remove the opening and ending, we're only 7 minutes in, and I'm telling you guys, we've rushed through this, we've rushed through that, we've rushed through this, we've rushed through that. And I feel like if you add it all up, even the opening and ending being cut wouldn't have solved anything. This is just a problem of a lack of episodes, and I can't really... Some people I saw on Twitter and of course on other platforms say like, oh, JC staff are being lazy, and or they are being they don't know what they're doing, kind of thing. And it's like, no, they know what they're doing. The problem is they're doing it, unfortunately, in a very constrained situation, clearly, because this episode needed another episode. Basically, this episode should have been split into 2 episodes. Up until now, I think it was only in volume 16 I said that, okay, an extra episode would have been beneficial, but that was adding everything up together from episodes 1 to 4. this episode alone needed one more episode, 100%, 110%. Because episode 5, if you remove the opening and ending, I feel like you could have added a couple of scenes that would have fit into those extra 2 or 3 minutes, 100%. This episode is where I would start saying, no, we needed an extra episode, period. No doubt about it. It is just unfortunately lacking in a lot of ways. Even if his connection with the rest of the Freya family members, because he's obviously has this interaction with Van, which is, or Vanir, and it's actually not bad. I think this scene was done well, but again, a little bit more would have been super nice as well. Now comes the big first problem. So we get to this Freya and Bell scene, right? And it's, again, remember the whole thought process about the loneliness factor, right? So you obviously have Freya and Bell interacting with one another, and of course Freya's trying to kind of pressurize him into believing that this is a curse, right? And the reason why she's wanting to pressurize him into believing that this is a curse is because of Uranos Freese. She mentions it right here, right? So I'm trying to figure out if I'm trying to see if I can maybe link into where she actually says Uranos Freese here, somewhere here. I'm trying to figure it out if I can actually kind of link into it. But yeah, there it is. There it is. Hold on a second. We saw it right here. We saw it right here, mentioning it here. 1 second. Come on. Come on. Come on. There it is. Uranos Freese. So I had to kind of do that to make sure it was on the screen. So in the light novel, they actually go on to a full description of why it needs to be broken and everything, right? Now, look, there's two things to this, right? There's two point of views to this, right? The first point of view as a light novel reader is I would have liked to have the full description, because why not? It's allowing people to, remember and realize what Uranos Freese is, and of course, keep people in the loop that Uranos Freese is super important for the season and for the context of what happens, right? But the other part of me, and this is a good point made by a fellow light novel reader and another person who's watching the anime as well, Flokins, one of my homies, he mentioned it in a chat I had with him, that, well, they've mentioned Uranos Freese before many a times. They've also mentioned and talked about, the whole idea of the removal of charm, or, Bell being immune to charm specifically, and what would happen if Uranos Freese was removed. His immunity to the charm would also be removed, right? It's been discussed and talked about in previous seasons and many a times, right? And his point isn't wrong either. Having it being harped on to people again and again and again is definitely something I wouldn't necessarily recommend the series do, right? I don't want them to keep mentioning it over and over again, but I do feel like in this moment, for this specific scene, I would disagree with Flokins on this one, because I feel like in this situation, the Uranos Freese mention and, why it needs to be broken down is significant in this scene particularly. I think in previous episodes and stuff, I've said it before, I don't think they needed to regularly explain it. They should have obviously named it, like I think I said this in the last episode, the episode before, I can't remember which episode it was. I think it was the episode where we saw eyes with Hestia, I think it was. I said in that episode they should have named it by its name, right? Rather than just, saying, oh, Bell's skill and, Bell's development is linked to eyes. It should have been mentioned Uranos Freese is linked to eyes and stuff like that. Not explain it, but say Uranos Freese, say the name Uranos Freese. Here they said it, but then they didn't expand upon it. And I feel like that's another scene that kind of went lacking in a way and missing, and unfortunately. Obviously, I'm glad that they still mention it, because it is super significant and super important in that sense. But I think it's pretty good. I think it is pretty good in that sense. It is a little interesting in that sense, of course, right? To see a perspective like that from, of course, a fellow light novel reader about how they perceive this, this scene and why it can easily be skipped as well. I disagree. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. What do you guys think? Do you think that they should mention it again, or do you think it's something that can be skipped? Because I feel like it shouldn't have been skipped. But if people do feel that way, then I'm kind of okay on them skipping it as well, if people feel that way. Now, of course, they talk about the anomalies, of course, right? The people who have avoided the curse charm, right? The likes of Asie, Ryu, Anya, and stuff like that. Now, this is where my biggest problems come into play for this episode, right? So we obviously have Anya coming into play here, and now one thing we do know from a previous episode, and I'll let you guys do the inferring here, is that we know that Freya's only lifted the charms from people in her familia. Now we know, of course, that Anya is Alan's brother, so we do know that she is an ex-member of the Freya familia. Surely, right? Clearly, she's probably an ex-member of the Freya familia, right? As a result, she's also been absolved, I should say, I guess is the best word here, or she doesn't have the charm imposed on her. She has the memories of everybody, basically, and Seer, of course, right? Whereas nobody does. And Mia also says nobody remembers about Seer, but because only she and Anya do. Now, of course, you can infer what this means about Mia, potentially. Again, I don't know why they're not just saying it outright, because in the light novels, they were blatantly obvious, and even the anime has been blatantly obvious about Mia's status as a, in my opinion, ex-member of the Freya familia. Same with Anya as well. But they've been just avoiding saying it. I don't know if they wanted to do like a big reveal, but it doesn't make any sense because, yeah. Let me just 1 second. I'm just typing out something because I've just got a response from one of them, one of my anime only friends. But yeah, I wanted to just see what they thought, basically. But anyways, coming back to this scene, I feel like they're trying to make it subtle, but it's so blatantly obvious at the same time, which is kind of frustrating because you could do so much with that. And again, this entire scene and this entire next 11 minutes from this point to the next, where Anya finally links up with like Alan, and then, you know, finds out about Freya and Seer, of course, right? It's done well. It definitely is very emotional, for sure. I really love Anya's VA's performance. Probably one of the best VA performances from a Danmachi character that's not one of the main characters or the main, like, you know, protagonists of the arc, right? Bell, Ryu, so on and so forth. I think it's one of the best performances from a VA outside of them, to be quite honest. Really well done to Anya's VA here. But there's only so much you can do, because I feel like even though it was super emotional and stuff, I felt that way personally, it was so much more emotionally traumatic and just more filling, I suppose is the best way to put it, in the light novel. They just skipped out on so much more talking and so much more exposition, because you got to see Anya and Alan's backstory, which there's a small chance we could see it in the next episode. There is a small chance, but I don't want to rely on the next episode, you know, basically trying to effectively tell us. But it's just so much more emotionally traumatic in the light novel between these two characters, because Anya is just like, you know, Anya is just explaining why she feels the way she does, whereas in this, she's very quiet and very much like, you can't be Seer, and that's it, and immediately goes into rage, whereas there's a lot more back and forth between the two characters as well. And even Seer also / Freya talks a lot more as well, and breaks it down as to how she did it and why she did it a bit as well. And it's the same even here as well with Ryu as well. There's so much more interactions between these two, and also Ryu realizing, you know, that Freya, how long has Freya been Seer and stuff like that. It's just condensed a lot more, and it makes Ryu seem like more of an idiot in a way at some points, right? But yeah, I mean, it's still emotional. I still feel it's super emotional, and it is well done animation wise. I really like the way they drew everything, like the drawings and just the way it looks is really nice. But do I think it's cut a lot? Yes, I do think it's cut a lot. And this is the problem. Like, it's already an 11-minute long scene, or 8-9 minute long scene, right? this should have been probably a 10 to 15 minute long scene. And I know that seems a lot, but it should have been a little bit longer. And I think this is again where I'll say a new episode would have been better. It would have been way, way, way better. But again, I really like that whole thing of that they approach that whole loneliness factor really well. You know, knowing the title of the episode was loneliness, it's done really well because you have Anya being super lonely. You have Asie, who's obviously, you know, now alone as well, basically. You have Bell alone. You have Hestia, who's alone. All of these characters are alone in a way, basically, right? So, yeah, I think that's one thing as well there, basically. With this Freya and Bell scene, I think they did it actually pretty well. This whole jealousy scene and everything, and the way Bell approached it with him mentioning Seer's name and stuff, right, was really well done. I love this part as well. Basically, this is what I thought it looked like in the light novel as well, so I'm very, very happy with this. I'm very glad that they did this. This scene, right, and this is where I have a problem, because not only here, but even earlier, this is, and I wanted to wait until this part came up, right? Because you obviously had, Freya, like, feeling some kind of way and feeling a kind of pain, effectively, you could say, right? She also had a similar thing happen, actually, in this scene in the light novels. But they didn't actually bring it up in the anime. And again, this is where I'm not happy that they're skipping out on details like this in multiple ways. I know that you could see that how she kind of looks a bit like Seer as well in this scene as well, kind of indicating that whole Bell and Seer thing, that whole Seer and Freya thing, that Seer is her real self, but she's kind of punching it down because of Bell's rejection, right? But they cut that part from the first Bell and Freya meeting in this episode as well, and that is where I will say that they could have done a bit better, because they have to kind of nail on that whole Seer is Freya more than Freya, or sorry, Freya is Seer more than Seer is Freya, right? They have to nail on that fact, because Seer is her true self. We were able to tell it from this episode a little bit more because of what we saw between her and Otarl earlier on, and then of course this scene as well, and of course what we're seeing with Hayden and Horn's, you know, thought processes as well when it comes to, of course, Freya's feelings, right? But the thing is, right, they have to kind of do more scenes like that, because the audience isn't going to really understand from one scene only. You have to kind of keep reminding the audience about it. That's my personal 2 cents on this, especially in this season. You have to kind of do it with this character, especially, right, who's already not being really liked a lot for what she's done. You have to give her some scenes to kind of prove that wrong in a way, right? I'm quite curious. It is pretty interesting in that sense. But anyways, that's just my personal opinion on that, of course, right? Now, that pretty much sums up the episode and my breakdown of it, of course, right, with the scenes. Again, it's just a lot of just cut content and, scenes that are just rushed effectively, and a lot of context is missing. And the thing is, right, this is where I would say another episode was needed, because I told you guys how many scenes were missing, right? This actually had some scenes missing from it. This was already rushed as well. The Uranos Hestia scene. The training sequence between Hayden and Bell was somewhat skipped as well, or a little bit rushed as well. This had a missing scene as well. This whole Anya from start to finish, with Mia Anya to Anya Seer to Ryu and Seer, because you had a lot of internal dialogue as well from Ryu's end as well about, especially when she proposed the threesome to, or Seer proposed the threesome to Ryu, that she was like disrespectful, disgusting, repulsive, and all that. She had that internal thoughts as well, and that was entirely skipped as well, and so much more was skipped as well. You add those up, and even the opening and ending being cut wouldn't have solved anything. And so in that situation, it's one of those things where I'm like, this is where another episode was definitely needed. It is definitely one where I would have said we needed another episode, and that is a big problem, unfortunately, from JC staff. I'm glad that they were able to at least get it to us in a form where it's still okay. Like I was just talking about, I just got one of the responses about the pacing and stuff. He thinks it's fine. It's not a problem for him. He thinks it's pretty good in that sense. But I'm kind of like on a light novel reader's perspective, you know, you read and you see so much descriptions and so much exposition and stuff, and it's like, well, so much of that is missing and so much context is missing, and it's like, well, you know, I wish they'd done a bit of a better job here. This is where I would have said, this is where I feel like JC Staff definitely did the weakest episode, in all honesty. Like I said, I think with episode 5, right, and the reason why I'd say episode 5 was better than this episode is because there was a thing of like, okay, if they'd just done the opening and ending scenes, you know, and removed them, they'd just done them in and removed them and added those extra scenes, it would have been a fine episode, I think, right? And I even said in that video breakdown that I think it's a 6 or a 7 out of 10, more so a 6. This episode is probably like a 4 or 5 out of 10 for me. It's average, it gets the job done, but it shows so much room for improvement. Now, the reason why I'm not giving it a 2 or 1 out of 10, I've seen some Danmachi fans giving it a 2 out of 10, calling JC Staff lazy as well, is because they aren't. The animation's still good, the production is still good. It's just a lot of it was just rushed because they had to rush it effectively because of a lack of time effectively. I was very concerned about volume 17, and I even said it in my, you know, in between, you know, when we were doing volume 16 to 17's transition, that I would have preferred if there was one less episode for volume 18 and one extra episode for volume 17. Guess I was right on that, huh? I was right on that, it seems like. But yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. I want to talk a lot more about the scenes and the cut content in the cut contents video. I just wanted to break down everything that happened in this scene, right? Again, you can see like Bell realizing it's, you know, slowly making that connection between Bell and Freya, Freya and Seer as well, right? That's also very, very good. So that is going to be something we'll see in the next episode potentially as well. We're gonna see what's gonna happen with Asie as well. What's she cooking up? Hestia, is she gonna do anything? Is there anything she can do? Would she find the right timing? We'll break it all down in the next episode, of course. But in the meantime, we of course have the cut contents and extra details to go over. So be sure to be on the lookout for that video as well. But thank you guys so much for watching this one. Please be sure to leave a like down below, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Until then, take it easy. Bye-bye.